So last year, in the halcyon days of 2019, we did the Ballpark Digest Broadcaster Chat. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler with the Lansing Lugnuts, joined by Mick Gillispie with the Tennessee Smokies of last year, and we told stories, we answered questions, we talked about what was going on, and we're bringing that back. But now we have Zoom to help us out, and we're joined by the man in charge, the owner, the operator of Ballpark Digest, the newsletter writer, and more, Kevin Reichard. First, hello to both of you. Mick, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see both of you guys. Congratulations. A lot's changed in your life since we last spoke. You're a dad now, so that's awesome. I'm sure you're not getting as much sleep. And also, you're the 2019 Broadcaster of the Year for Ballpark Digest, and that is a huge honor that you really deserve, and couldn't be happier for a person to get that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, following in your shoes. And now, when I won it, I thought, this makes me visible. So now whatever I can do to help out other broadcasters, whatever we can do to tackle different things. And so we'll discuss a lot of different things over the course of this chat and future chats as well. But right now, there are no games for us to broadcast, but that does not mean that we don't have things to discuss. And Kevin, let's bring you in right now. Let me bring you to the piece that you wrote for the Ballpark Digest newsletter. We're in the end game now.
Yes.
What were the feedback that you received on this?
Not a whole lot, to be honest. You know, I had already talked to the sources about it, you know, as I was doing interviews before it ran. Several newspapers picked it up. The New York Daily News picked it up. As far as the people involved, you know, it was like, yeah, that's what's going on. And to sum up what's going on, you know, right now the talks of contraction in minor league baseball have evolved to the point where Major League Baseball is looking to take over part or basically all of minor league baseball, setting up its own franchise system, overseeing franchises in a more restrictive manner than in the past, and generally subsuming the sport.
Mick, how are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I read that. I thought it was a good story. You know, I have a lot of information on this as well. You know, I saw Pat O'Connor last year, August the 11th. I went on a tour of the teams that Boyd Sports runs in the Appalachian League, and he just so happened to be at Elizabethton, and he was concerned about this. It hadn't hit the media yet. And honestly, I thought at the time that it was Major League Baseball basically threatening minor league baseball for concessions. I really did not believe that minor league baseball would see 42 teams on this retracted list, and that the major league teams were serious about it. But I can tell you, I've talked to some people that are very influential on this, on the Major League Baseball side, and they feel like it's going to happen. The owners of the teams, or at least some of them, could really care less how many teams there are. They're going to listen to the player development people. And unfortunately, you know, some of the player development people think that this is the right move. A lot of this started with Jeff Luhnow of the Astros. They contracted teams. They wanted to have all of their minor leaguers in their facilities that are really their spring training complexes. You're talking about getting away from playing actual games and doing more of the skill-based stuff. And I honestly, I feel like that this is kind of part of a larger issue that Major League Baseball is having. I think this started back when they slotted the draft 8 years ago. Now all of a sudden you're getting less great athletes to save money. This is a money move. I think the same amount of money is going to go in. It's just going to go to fewer minor league players. That's an entirely different topic, but the funnel is getting smaller, you know, the funnel of players that goes down. But baseball's got a lot of issues right now. They want to shorten the time of the game. They want to change the rules, the juice baseball, teams cheating. And then this to me is, I guess just because, like you, Jesse and Kevin, you've covered the minor leagues forever. I think it's short-sighted to get rid of all these minor league teams in these different markets. But they're in my opinion, Major League Baseball they're set with what they want to do. And I think that these short season rookie league teams are all going to be contracted.
This is something that would be coming to a head with the negotiations this coming December anyway. But there's no baseball right now. There's no Major League Baseball. There's no minor league baseball. Minor league baseball season was scheduled to get underway last week. So Kevin, let me ask you, because of COVID-19, how has that changed or exacerbated? How has that affected these negotiations between minor league baseball and Major League Baseball?
I think it's had the effect of fracturing any solidarity in minor league baseball. I think you're seeing the AAA teams and the AA teams more willing to go with this than obviously the rookie league teams. And there's some tensions in minor league baseball about this, to be sure, because some welcome it. St. Pete isn't as well regarded uniformly within the minor leagues. And so some owners are saying, maybe we would be better off working directly with our parent on this stuff. I'm not so sure it's true, but I think that there is a general fracturing in the minor league ownership world over the merits of this proposal. And one thing I want to go back to that Mick said, Mick's absolutely right about everything that he just opined on. He's got it nailed as well. But what I think you would concur with this, Mick, is that Major League folks spend, a 20th of the time over their minor league affiliates as the minor league affiliates do thinking about their major league parents.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I also, as I was in spring training, and as long as we had it, and I talked about this with a few people, I was really surprised in the lack of knowledge that some of the major league people have about minor league baseball. First off, they have this perception that minor league teams are making money hand over fist. That's just not true. It's just not. Like even the best well-run top franchises make some money, but it's not a huge amount. It's not like the major leagues where you're killing it. The other thing is that Major League Baseball teams really think that they can do a lot of the operation stuff better. I totally disagree, because I've seen the teams that the major league affiliates own, and they're not the best. As a matter of fact, their operations are the worst. And the only reason that some of those teams aren't on the list of 42 that should be are because they're owned by the major league team. I saw read Keith Law's story a couple of weeks ago, and he was taught, and it's the first time that it dawned on me, by the way, that a lot of this is a power move to lower the amount of money that the franchises are worth, because some of the major league teams want to buy them. If that's the case, it's a shame on them. That they shouldn't do it that way. But taking the other side of this, the way that they're looking at it, minor league baseball put themselves in this situation for a couple reasons. First off, and I thought this for a long time, Mobile should have never had a professional franchise if they didn't want to have a professional franchise. If the city wasn't going to support it, if ownership wasn't going to take care of it, it was an awful facility. And it was like musical chairs. And whoever didn't have a chair ended up in Mobile until they got rid of the team, right? But for years, it was a miserable situation. There's other teams that are like that right now where, some of whether it's geography or just the fact that it's not a very popular franchise, they end up in situations like that where the field stinks, the clubhouse is awful, it doesn't have a professional feel to it. The ownership is not going to invest, the city's not going to invest, no fans are going to show up, and then they've got to send their players there. That's one of the issues. Is that they said, well, the standards for the ballparks needed to be here. Well, a lot of the owners, they didn't care about keeping them there. I work for a guy in Randy Boyd who spent $900,000 a couple years ago to redo the clubhouse and build a hitting facility. And I can't name one other team in the Southern League in my years there that without a new stadium involved ever did anything like that. Now, he's friends with Tom Ricketts. You know, Tom went to all the affiliates of the Cubs, said, hey, we when he bought the team, he said, we want to have the best facilities. And he challenged everyone, and South Bend did it, and then we did, you know, so that happened. Now, not every owner has taken the time to go to the minor leagues and get to know the owners and to be involved like Tom Ricketts. That's why I think he's one of the best out there. But at the end of the day, baseball wanted to have their players go to a place where they're safe, where they feel like they're being treated well, you know, where they can get their work done. And the teams that were on the bottom end of that scale, they fell off the cliff. And that was I think that was what really started this. And then you go from there, and it's like, hey, wait a second, you know, now you got players complaining about not making any money. There's not a lot of money out there. Believe it or not, the minor league players are a very small part of what show up to the games at the minor leagues. That's crazy to think that, right, guys? But you know what? They're there for the beer special. They're there to see what's going on. You know, in between innings. They like the fact that it's a cheap family entertainment. You could put Jesse, and you, Kevin, out there, and I don't think it would. If it was a really fun event, I don't know that it would really change things a lot. And I'll tell you how I know that, because I've done games and I've been in the minor leagues a long time. Chris Bryant did a rehab on a Monday night at the Smokies. It went from like, you know, 700, 800 or 1,000 people to a sellout on a Monday night in the middle of, you know, whenever, right? That's why the big league guys make so much money, because their brand brings people in. You know, people go, they go more in the minor leagues just for the, you know, hey, I might see somebody I'm not going to ever remember. But independent baseball showed us too that, you know, hey, these guys might not be on the way up, but fans will still go if it's a good event, you know. So, but the players want to be compensated like they're Chris Bryant. And so if we're going to do that with, you know, a limited amount of money for what their real value is, this is part of it. We're going to have to cut a bunch of other guys that aren't going to get a chance now, so that we can pay the guys that are playing and the upper levels more. At least that's what I was told by the people that, you know, that are making the decision on this.
Let me go into a couple of things that you said, Mick. One of them being that fans don't go because of the players. I think that's something that's learned. Let's go way back decades ago. As Branch Rickey was setting up the minor league system, right, the affiliate system for the Cardinals, Kennesaw Mountain Landis called him on the carpet and said, you are affecting pennant races in these leagues when you move your players around. If you're calling a guy up, that is telling the fans of that city that their team doesn't matter compared to your priorities. And Branch said, well, you know, that's true. You got a point there. What happens is anytime you have a really good player on a team, if you're a fan of that team, you love having that player there. You love having a number one prospect, or whoever it might be that's there. But you also ask, how long are we going to have him? When you mentioned independent ball, I've been in 2 different independent leagues, and because it's so rare for the good players, not the absolute who are going to get signed by the major league team, not the absolute mediocre guy who they might release the next week, but the good players, the fans love them and create fan clubs because the indie league teams want to win.
Yes.
And so they're looking for those players who help them win, and the fans get into them. So I think that fans have simply learned in the minor leagues not to get attached and not to come. And the players know the same thing because the players want to move on. And the second point I wanted to make was, you mentioned about the teams that improve their situation, or the teams that succeed, or the teams that don't. I think that the major leagues and the minor leagues are at times microcosmal, as in you can say there's a New York Yankees or an LA Dodgers from the major leagues in different minor league spots where the fans are great and the market is great and they're making money. And you can also say that there's a Tampa Bay Rays minor league where the team might not want to be there. There's something with the city or whatever it is, what goes on at the major league level where they have revenue sharing to help markets out. The minor leagues can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not saying that the players aren't a part of this, but they think, some of them, that they're this part of it, right? And they're this part of it. At the big league level, they're this part of it because they're a commodity. You know, Chris Bryant and Javi Baez and Anthony Rizzo and Wilson Contreras. I mean, you go to see those guys, you know. The only guy that I remember of that group that anyone even knew of when they were in the Southern League was Chris Bryant, because he just came in with so much hype. Javi Baez might be the best player I ever saw every day. And when we were in Jacksonville, where he's from, a lot of people showed up, but people didn't know him. I mean, we would be on the bus in the middle of South Carolina, and people would come up to Chris Bryant for an autograph as a minor leaguer. That never happens. Let me just tell you, unless you have Ryan Sandberg as your manager. The part of it to me that bugs me about this is, I guess it's just where we are right now as a culture, you know. Like, when I got into baseball, this was something I wanted to do my entire life. I was just so happy to be able to go and talk about the game and broadcast, and I would have done anything. And I did. You know, I put in my time. I paid my dues. Like, I learned the game. I talked to the managers. My first job, I got paid $500 a month. I had to eat the extra concession foods to be able to afford, to be able to eat, right? I mean, $500 a month in Wilson, North Carolina in the middle of summer, right? And then now it's like, hey, you know, we're not happy about the buses, and we're not happy about the pay, and we're not happy about the facilities. And it's like, look, man, 4 of you guys are making it. 4, maybe 5. You know, be glad that you got the uniform on your back right now. And it's like the biggest problem that I have with the minor leagues today compared to 5 years ago is the coaches. Like, it's like, you guys, it's your job to teach these dudes how lucky they are that those fans are in the stands right now paying for your butt to have that uniform on. You know, it's like, they don't get it. And I'm lucky because I got to be around some really great baseball people. Russ Nixon was the first manager that I had, and he kicked my butt every day. I want to say another word, but like, I was a nerd. And I mean, like, he worked that out of me, let me tell you. Whether he was cracking on me on the bus, or challenging something that he heard I said on the broadcast, or teaching me about the game of baseball. And you know what? This is a guy that managed the Reds and the Braves in the big leagues. He was the third base coach for the Big Red Machine. He knew more about baseball. He grew up in Cincinnati around, Pete Rose and Jim Fregosi and all these guys that made this huge impact on the game. You know, the one thing I'll never forget about him is that he said, respect the game. You know, just respect it. And I think that way. You know, maybe I'm old school because of that. When I hear these guys complaining about the things that they complain about, and let me say this because I'm sure some of the players that I've broadcasted for are going to be like, "Oh, Mick, I love you guys. Like, I love the players. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I want to see all those guys succeed, but I want the people who are, and I'm not talking about one specific coach or manager. I'm just saying, like, I want the people that are running the teams, the coaches, to reiterate to those guys every day how lucky they are to wear that uniform. And the last thing I want to say about that, and because I feel like that's a big part of this problem, is, I grew up in Baltimore. Cal Ripken was the star player on the team. You know about this, Jesse. But it was Cal Sr. that laid the foundation for all of that. They talk about Cal Sr. Go read his books. Like, he was the first guy there every day and wore his uniform like he was in the Army. Like, you could bounce like a quarter off of his jersey. You know what I mean? Like, that all the creases were going to be right. You know, like, the uniform was going to look the way that it was supposed to look because he respected the game so much. I spent a couple years with Storm Davis as my pitching coach. And, of course, he was on the 83 World Series Orioles, the 89 A's, won a World Series there. He's a winning player, came up through Baltimore's system. And we should talk about Cal Sr. And he said, Cal would sit next to me on the charter flights and just teach me about baseball, right? And to respect the game and just all the things that I just said a second ago, just how lucky we are, how to mentally process this. So I'm not saying like Smokies, I'm just saying in general, right? That right now a lot of this contraction to me goes right back to respecting the opportunity that you have. And the minor leagues aren't supposed to be a career. It's supposed to be like an internship to get to the big leagues. So for the 4 or 5 guys that have the ability, the talent, the luck, being in a spot where they can get there, that's going to be great. And for the other guys, they're going to look back in 20 years and be able to tell everyone that they got to wear a uniform and somebody actually paid them to go play the game. And I just wish that more of the players right now respected that.
Kevin, your thoughts?
I cannot match that because I've not had those experiences that Mick had. I'm not a product of the baseball world. I admire the baseball world. I love baseball lifers. So I see in people that passion for the game for decades of their lives. But in terms of players being lucky, man, they sure are. And I know it's hard being, really penniless in American society. But then again, to be 22 and be living the dream, man, a lot of us would give up our left little toe for that.
What we're likely going to see is down the road, starting as soon as next year, fewer teams, fewer baseball players in baseball, players getting paid more money because there are fewer players in baseball, and increased focuses in different organizations. I think the Dodgers were the first team that I saw that were catering pregame and postgame meals. The Blue Jays have their team dietitians. And last year, the Great Lakes Loons, the Dodgers organization, had a mobile chef with their trailer traveling along to every single place where the Great Lakes Loons went on the road cooking for them.
Yeah.
We should see more and more things done to cater for players, but that comes because of fewer teams. That comes because teams are saying we're spending less money on the many, so we can spend more money on the few.
And the direct control of teams by their major league parents makes it all possible. Right now, major league teams don't necessarily have the ability to order things like kitchens in minor league facilities. In the future, they will. And that's
on COVID-19.
Started.
True. On COVID-19, we are at different levels. In terms of Kevin, I see you as being from above and ethereal, talking to everyone at all sorts of different levels from outside the game and inside the game. Mick, you're in between us, and I'm at ground level where we're just saying, let's go day by day.
Yeah.
Let's turn out great social media entertainment and fun and whatever we can do to enjoy ourselves today and then enjoy ourselves tomorrow and plan for next week. And we'll see what happens. And hopefully we'll have minor league baseball by the 4th of July, but who knows? And it's out of our control anyway. So what are each of your perspectives on this?
My perspective is it's going to be hard to have any baseball season starting in July or August, just because I think we're going to find there's much more incidence of the coronavirus in society than we know because testing has gone so poorly. And so I think there's a good chance we'll see the Arizona and Florida plan go forward in controlled circumstances. But if you notice, the plans that have come out for being at training camps don't include minor league players. They're just the major league guys. And so it's going to be really difficult to salvage a whole lot of the season this year. And I think a lot of teams are bucking up for the long haul.
Mick, how do you see things moving forward?
Well, I mean, look, I'm optimistic. I mean, we're only in, early April. And, I just look at where we are right now as a country. And I get it. Like, the coronavirus is dangerous. I grew up in Baltimore. I know dangerous, and I'm going to tell you right now, being poor and being hungry is just as scary to me or more than the coronavirus. And I've been saying that on my social media since this started. I'm more afraid of the government and everybody not having a job than I am I'm hopeful that maybe I'm one of the 99% that gets it and makes it. And honestly, if I thought that I could get, if I go get it right now and take that risk and go back to work tomorrow or 2 weeks when I got over it or die, I'd take that risk because I cannot stand sitting at home like this. And I hate the fear that I see and feel every time I turn on the news. Eventually we're going to have to go back to work. Look, if you have a pre-existing condition or you're elderly, you better hide out because it's deadly for you. But for us, I mean, it's not. It can be, but it's not. What's deadly is sitting at home for a month and not working and looking at my bank account and going, you know what, I got kids to feed, I got stuff to do here. And I think what we've done by staying inside and flattening out the curve and kind of moving it down is going to help out a lot. And then, like Kevin said, obviously the testing is a big part of this. The minute that we can test everybody like we're doing overseas, we're going to be all right. Because you test someone, hey, if you got it, you stay at home, right? But we cannot afford to wreck our wonderful economy. And the fact that someone like me who grew up poor can make it to where they have a pretty darn good life. And now all of a sudden just like sit at home and watch all that go down because we're afraid of the virus. I get it. Like, it's a dangerous thing. And I've followed all of the rules. Like, I'm staying inside. I mean, I jog. I go outside to jog and go to the grocery store. I stay 6 feet away from everyone. I'm not saying that like don't listen to the medical experts. But what I'm saying is that sooner than later, we better do something. And I'm saying something like we better start moving things to open back up. And I'm guessing that's going to happen in about 2 weeks. And I'm thinking that by July that we'll have baseball. I hope we have minor league baseball. I really, really do, because it would just be horrible for all of these minor league teams that depend on these games to be able to eat. It's the same thing with the players. Like, they got to get out there and play. Look, I worked really, really hard to get on TV and broadcast Cubs games, right? And I'm just a fill-in, but I got there. And then this virus comes. I'm doing radio in Chicago on Friday. I'm doing Cubs Marquee Network game on Saturday. I got a season ticket holder event on Sunday. And Thursday, they shut everything down. Friday, I'm flying back home. That's cost me a lot of money and also a lot of hard work to get there. So I've thought about this for the last month. And I mean, just speaking from the heart, like, I just want our government and, the people who are in charge to think long-term as far as people being able to, the common person being able to pay their bills and the impact that it has shutting it down. What's more dangerous? Having 80% of the people go through a depression like my grandfather used to tell me about when I was a kid, or take 2% or 1% of people that get this virus, die, which is terrible, but 98% make it. There has. I'm not saying I know what that point is, but I'm telling you, sitting at home like this for more than a month is not good either. And I'm ready to get back to work. And honestly, I've talked to a lot of other people that feel the same way. And then I've talked to some people that want to stay at home. And what's a free country? If you're afraid and you feel like you got a pre-existing condition, then stay at home. But there comes a point where people like me that will roll the dice on this and want to just get back to normal life can do it. And that's kind of where I'm at. Except getting back to normal life may include washing my hands, a little social distancing, but wearing a mask. I don't know. But sitting at home for more than another 2 weeks is something that I'm just not really. I know you got your mask, Jesse. I'm not.
Got the mask right here.
You got it right there. Yeah. I'm not all about it. And then look, you're in a place in Michigan where you guys have been hit really hard with this. We haven't been hit hard in Tennessee. Like, no one has it. Like, I've talked to people that work at the hospitals and they're like, everyone thinks they have it, and you come in and like, no one has it. Everyone's scared because they see the news, but they don't have it. Maybe they should be scared, right? I don't know. But it just like maybe in Memphis or Nashville, and there's a few cases around here, but not many, I want the plan that tells me we're getting back in. And then as far as baseball is concerned, I really, really hope that we have Major League Baseball and we have minor league baseball and we just figure out a way to make things happen.
Kevin, your reaction?
He nails the frustration so many people feel about the situation at hand. I'm not a medical expert. I'm not an economic expert. I can't say what should and shouldn't be done under the circumstances. So that frustration is very real, and he speaks for a lot of people when he expresses that frustration. I'm more willing to stay at home. He's more willing to get to work. There's got to be a point where the two of us can have our way.
Talk to a lot of baseball players who are bored. Talk to a lot of baseball players who are going, what do I do now? What do I do next week? That said, I'm a shelter-in-place person. I'm a person who says we can't lose that 1%, or whatever the percentage is, because that would be hundreds of thousands toward however many people. Plus, what hit home for me, my brother, my sister, and my brother-in-law have all contracted COVID-19. My sister and my brother-in-law have recovered, thank goodness. They lost their sense of taste. They lost their sense of smell. It debilitated them. They are healthy people. My brother still thinks that he's on the mend. Hopefully he's recovering, but he's been hit by terrible fever. He's been hit by terrible chills. And these are people who are younger than me, and like, I'm not as fit as them. They are really fit. So it does worry me how it affects people. And let's say we try to start baseball up. If we lose somebody, if we lose a valued coach, a manager, a scout, and we are losing these people throughout our society, but all it has to do is just hit home with that one person. I love John Prine's music. We just lost John Prine. So I think that that's hard, Mick, to being told week after week, as you are taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and stay home, and your life and everybody else's life is on pause and you can't go anywhere. That's really hard. But being shown the danger from away via my family, and thinking about my father who's diabetic, or other members of my family who are vulnerable, and going, I've had some members of my family catch it. I better not have other members of my family catch it. Well, I don't know about either of the two of you. I was in spring training while it was breaking out in Bradenton, or I was in Cleveland calling college basketball while it was breaking out in Cuyahoga County. So I came back worrying that I was asymptomatic. And thank goodness it does not affect the young. But when my baby was born on December 23rd, every single doctor said, you make sure that that baby is nowhere near anyone who has not been vaccinated for the flu. So we made sure that everyone was vaccinated, and no one came to see us for 4 weeks unless we were sure about them. And I'm working at Central Michigan University, where I'm surrounded by students who are catching the flu. So I was washing my hands and doing everything I could, and terrified that I was bringing the flu home to my baby. And this is just another version of that.
Yeah, hopefully your brother, I mean, we'll be definitely thinking about him, man. I hate to hear that. It's a real thing. I mean, like, I'm not discrediting like how dangerous it is. But I can just tell you right now, growing up in Baltimore, desperate people, they're just as dangerous, if not more. And when you take someone's livelihood away from them, like our government has with this shutdown, there's only a certain amount of time that people are going to go without having the essentials. You know, like, the government was really great. They're going to send us $1,200. You know, like, no offense, but, you know, $1,200 during baseball season to me is not that much money. You know, now I'll take the $1,200 when baseball's out, you know, when I'm not working as much, you know, hey, that might be a good, you know, money. But right now, like, the amount of money that these guys have cost me with shutting things down is going to kill me months down the road. You know, think about someone that's living check to check, and maybe they're not in a situation like I am, where they have a college education and can figure out a way to make ends meet. You know, I know it's tough for a lot of people because they didn't grow up like that. But I did, and I know. And what I'm saying is not to you, Jesse, but I'm just saying in general. It's like, I'm afraid of the desperation that people are going to have and how they're going to have to make ends meet. my grandfather, raised by my grandfather, used to talk about the Great Depression constantly. I'm telling you, if I heard, one story from him, I heard a million of them. And he made more money than his parents from trapping animals in Maryland, and sold them to Sears and Roebuck, like back in the 20s or whatever, whenever that was. I don't know that our society right now is the type of society that's going to go out and trap animals to pay their bills. I'm more worried about someone getting a gun and robbing people at the gas station, and doing things that are against the law and maybe maybe dangerous to try to get the amount of money that it's going to take to pay your bills. That's why I'm saying that we have to get back to work. And that's my point on this. Sitting at home for me, it's terrible. And then I read a story today about a preacher in Virginia that decided he was going to have his church service, and they told him not to because of coronavirus, and then he died. So I hope not that guy, because I get it. This is a real thing. But at the same time, me personally, I'm more concerned about all of the people that aren't going to have jobs, because I feel like poverty over the long term is going to be a lot more dangerous than corona. But, I guess we'll find out.
Which you mentioned months and months down the road. I mean, Kevin, writing on the business of sports, of baseball, of football, of arena, this has already killed the XFL.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is short term so far. We are still only in the first weeks, 5 weeks, however long, from March until here we are in mid-April. This is going to have such long-term ramifications, as Mick talked about, month to month to month down the road. And you are going to be sorting a lot of things out and be talking to a lot of people that we might not even understand right now, but you're going to be reporting on in September or next year when it comes to arenas, when it comes to businesses, when it comes to teams and owners, that here we are right in the thick of things and not understanding it.
Yeah, it's interesting because we also did the Arena Digest site, and the response there is they're a little bit more optimistic, but that site's been really growing because the arena people are actually optimistic that we'll be back for their traditional best of the year, which is starting in the fall. Their attitudes are totally different than the baseball season. And the football people are really split. The NFL's like, we're marching on. College football, they're budgeting big losses. They're not quite so sure that they're going to have big years at all. So the reactions are just so varied. XFL, like you said, just declared bankruptcy. I mean, we're not even going under. It's like we have our bills. We're walking away, and so there's a lot of uncertainty at this time. But I wanted also to just throw one last thing in here about impacts in the family. My dad's 93. My dad was born in the Great Depression. So he grew up in a Great Depression family where the family farm was lost. He's still alive. He contracts corona, he's dead. Mm-hmm. I mean, in 2 days. There's absolutely no doubt about it. So I do take the threat of what's going on, pretty seriously. It means I can't see my dad when he's in his 90s. I mean, video conferencing, but I can't go up there and see him just in case I have an infection. My sister is a critical care nurse in the same community. She drops groceries off at his door and can't see him. So that's how it's affected us, affected me, and why I'm a little maybe more cautious than Mick is about trying to get things back to normal too quickly.
Yeah. Well, the other part of that too is that you have to also kind of keep in mind that if I go out and one of the first people to go out and risk it, you still got to stay away from the people that you love that are at risk, and be real vigilant about that part of it too. And I think that when things do open up, that's going to be part of the game plan, where you're going to have to say, hey, look, if the kids go to school, grandma and grandpa, you got to stay away, we just can't see you right now. And I've got an uncle who has lung cancer, and all I want to do is go visit. I just want to go. They're not going to see this video. I want to surprise them. I've been wanting to do that since I found out that what the situation was. And they're so scared of the coronavirus. I'm like, you know what? I know I don't have it, but I don't know that I don't have it, So I'm staying away, and that's just part of it right now.
Can I tell you something I've seen? There's been this complaint about society. All the kids staying inside with their video games, or people Netflixing, or everything else going on. We're having gorgeous weather right now in Michigan. And so my wife and I are strolling our baby around the neighborhood, and everybody is outside. All the kids are outside. I saw kids improvising a game of baseball on a basketball court. Just a couple of kids throwing a baseball back and forth, and the batter, if he swung and missed, he chased the ball. I see all sorts of families out there just enjoying themselves. If and when the green light happens, people are going to be so glad to go back to ballparks and so glad to go back to arenas and wherever else that they can go.
Yeah, but the thing that we will need to remember is the ballparks of the near future are not going to look like the ballparks of today. I know several owners already pricing out how to remove every other seat in the ballpark and putting a table there, literally. So there's already movement on that front in the baseball world.
That brings up the question, Kevin, that you and I have talked about, which is this is allowing a reset of sorts. This is allowing people to say, while we're at home with no baseball, when baseball returns, what do we want it to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And that planning is going on. It's a very definite thing. I think you're going to see the ballparks get kind of smaller. I think you're going to see seating taken out. I think the big social spaces may end up being revamped a little bit, at least for the first year or two. It's going to be a lot of thought. It's going to be a lot of needed leadership in the industry, quite honestly. But I think it's a certainty that'll happen.
Kevin, you put out the word, hey, we're getting together, we're chatting. Baseball Thesaurus.
Yes.
What questions do people have?
Yes. First of all, thanks to everyone who responded to the plea for questions and comments for this broadcast. We're not, as you figured out, this isn't live, but I hope to bring this live next week, and if the two of you agree. We'll get it live and get people sending comments and whatnot. The question we got about the Baseball Thesaurus has to do with the background of rhubarb, which I'm sure both of you have seen your shares. It came from a reader who said he was exposed to it by Dizzy Dean on the CBS Saturday Game of the Week with Pee Wee Reese. So we're talking late 50s, early 60s with Dizzy on the national broadcast.
Oh yeah.
I think it came before that. I mean, Jesse, in the book you mentioned rhubarb coming from Red Barber, like that phrase, and that just seems like a very Red Barber sort of thing to say. Sort of rural, sort of twangy rhubarb. So I'm sure you both have seen your share of rhubarbs over time.
Mick, would you like to share a favorite rhubarb that you've seen?
Well, you talk about Red Barber, Catbird in the Rhubarb Seed. Isn't that his book?
Yes. Or rhubarb in the catbird seed.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but I love Red Barber. When I got it started in this business, a guy named Mark Hauser was the broadcaster of the Greenville Braves, and I had an accent, which not saying I don't now, but it's not that bad, And he said, hey, you need to do something about that accent, and you need to learn about broadcasting and read this book by Red Barber called The Broadcasters, So that's kind of where I started, and I've recommended that book to a lot of young guys getting into the business as well, because it is such a great book.
Let me take a brief moment to talk about how rhubarb landed in baseball and how it landed in Red Barber's lap and in his lexicon. I've got it in front of me, the Dixon Baseball Dictionary, 3rd edition. I was an actor in Maryland in addition to being a baseball fan growing up. And what we were always told as actors is if you're in the background, you say the word rutabaga. And so everybody says rutabaga and it sounds like the crowd is murmuring. Back in the day, you would say rhubarb. You could say whatever you'd like, but it works out well. Rhubarb being a term used by the background actors dates way back. And just to bring this up, from that initial term, from those actors and everybody standing in the corner, there was a bartender who used the word rhubarb to describe a fray. And this actually goes back to a word, as Gary Schumacher was quoted as saying, "It suggested an untidy mess, a disheveled tangle of loose ends, like the fibers of stewed rhubarb." So there was a bartender who was quoted as calling a fray a rhubarb, and this bartender's quote made its way into Tom Meany, who was writing New York sports writer. And Tom Meany described a fray as a rhubarb. And from Tom Meany describing a fray as a rhubarb, it got its way to Gary Schumacher. And I wanted to take a brief moment with Gary Schumacher right now. Have either of the two of you heard of Gary Schumacher?
Yes.
Ah, Mick, newspaper man who became the governor. Let me give you a couple of Gary Schumacher quotes. "Napoleon could have took Moscow. Trouble was the bum had no bench." About the Civil War, he summed up the Confederate Army by saying, "Real good club, couldn't win on the road." He was the baseball guy. He phrased everything as baseball, and he used jargon. So when he grabbed rhubarb from Tom Meany, who had taken it from that Brooklyn bartender, and read Barber, much like Mick and I, hanging out around the players, hanging out around media, we're always listening. We're seeing how people describe everything. Red Barber heard Gary Schumacher, the baseball raconteur as he was called, heard him describe a fight as a rhubarb, and that stuck in Red's mind. And the very next chance that he had to call it, it was a rhubarb, and a rhubarb it remained as long as he stayed on the radio. And because Red was Red, everyone therefore started calling it a rhubarb. So Red got it from Gary, who got it from Tom Meany, who got it from a Brooklyn bartender, who got it from way back as the jargon travels along from theater. The best rhubarb that I ever saw in person with the Windy City Thunderbolts in 2008. The year before I had joined the team, we had our troubles with the Washington Wild Things, specifically their leadoff hitter, and he didn't forget because the Windy City Thunderbolts got the best of him. So the very next meeting between the two clubs, there he is leading off, and he makes his way to the bases, gets to second base. Our pitcher, big right-hander named Ross Stout, the crowd would call out extra Stout anytime they wanted him to pitch deeper into games, picked him off. So Stout has him in a rundown between second and third, and they're just putting the ball back and forth, right? He's in the pickle, so off it goes second baseman, runs him back toward third, gives to the third baseman, runs him back to second, off to the shortstop runs him toward third, overhands it with the lob, and there's Ross Stout to grab it and apply the easy tag. Now this base runner for Washington was not about to let himself give himself up, especially because he still had that memory. And he speared Ross Stout as hard as he could. It was a wrestling, football style, head and shoulder right into him as he went horizontal. But Ross Stout took it. And when they hit the ground, Ross rolled him over. This is right in front of our third base side dugout. And the entire Windy City team exploded out of the dugout and formed an arc. And that way, there was no way any of those Washington Wild Things could make their way to their teammate. And then the entire Thunderbolts team, led by Ross, took their time destroying this guy. Then the umpire settled things down. The third base coach, part of the Wild Things, had his hat taken off, kicked and ripped. They settled things down, and we won the game on a walk-off in the bottom of the ninth. It was awesome. That was my favorite rhubarb.
Yeah, so that's independent baseball, right?
Independent baseball.
Yeah. So I've never worked in it, but I've heard that the rhubarbs in independent baseball are memorable, and that certainly is one. I've got a good one too. I worked in Chattanooga for a couple of years, and I wasn't the main broadcaster, but I was assistant to Larry Ward, who's he's a Hall of Famer in the Southern League. He's one of the best that the league's ever had. He's a great friend, mentor, whatever. Larry never took off. I mean, he used to tell me all the time, like, you do every single game, which is something that I don't pass on anymore. I'm like, hey, take some time off and recharge your batteries, like whoever my assistant is, because it's a long season. And I just over the years, I realized, like, hey, look, man, I mean, like, there's more to life than baseball. It took me a long time to realize that, though. Let me say that. But Larry took off for his daughter's graduation. The year before, the Lookouts lost 26 of 37 games, which is a league record, to the Carolina Mudcats. It was they were the Marlins affiliate. I remember Jeremy Hermedia was on the team, Hermida, whatever his name is. But they had a good team. They had a lot of good players. I mean, just constantly, bringing guys in that could play. So this would have been 2006. In 2005, they just destroyed Chattanooga. Well, 2006, there were still a lot of those same Lookouts. They were the Reds affiliate on the team. But if you remember, the umpires were on strike. And so that particular year. So there was a lot of bad blood. And we played way, way too many games, which I blame on the Southern League. And we got beat, and I blame that on us. We were terrible. And so the next year we go there. And I want to say the second game in, we had a pitcher named Eddie Valdez, and the replacement umpires behind the plate, and they were awful. If you would have been there then, and I think you were, Jesse, right? You were been there then. They were terrible. Like, you realize at the time how darn good the Southern League umpires are, because when you put like amateurs back there, they're terrible. So they're messing up calls. Eddie's complaining about the strike zone to the umpire who has no clue. This is a big heavy set guy. And the batter, who I don't remember who the batter was for Carolina, he says something in Spanish to the catcher, who is also Latino, and Eddie heard it. Well, Eddie, hot-headed guy. And the batter and pitcher start arguing. Next, to do right in the ribs. So the guy charges the mound, and Eddie gives him a kung fu karate, kick, and it was on. And because we had the replacement umpires, these guys walked off. They were scared. The coaches had to break this fight up. It lasted for legitimately 3 minutes of fighting. There was Tommy Herr's son, Aaron Herr, who was a first-round pick for the Braves, was our first baseman. And I'll never forget, like, he was hurt for a month, even played through it, because he was punching one of these guys in the head. I mean, like, I just on the ground, punching him in the head. There was so much anger about losing all those games to that particular team and bad tensions. And so I just remember those two details, the karate kick, the umpires walking off the field, not wanting to get involved. And then I remember that the Lookouts started to beat the Mudcats after that. And so I've always remembered, like, when Tampa Bay started getting good, Joe Madden was there. They had the brawl with the Yankees. Like, sometimes, and I know that it's wrong, but sometimes when you go out there and you mix it up like that, it changes the way that the two teams the respect level or whatever. I don't know. All I know is that Lookouts team had Joey Votto on it. Maybe, you know what? Joey Votto was playing first. Aaron Herr was playing third. Now that I think about it. It changed the respect level that those organizations had for each other in the Southern League. And Chattanooga ended up winning the first half and got into the playoffs.
About teams mixing it up and getting better, all you've got to do as a fan is just see which team in their dugout is leaning over the railing and shouting at the umpire, and you know that they're into the game. And there's a team, the umpire makes a controversial call and nobody in that dugout shouts at him. What, are they not locked in? What's going on?
Let me share one last rhubarb story. And really, this is more a tribute to like a walking rhubarb. And I don't know if either of you ever saw him in action, but does the name Doug Simonek mean anything to you? He was manager first in Fargo, Moorhead, and then went to Winnipeg. Or Winnipeg first and then Fargo, Moorhead. He was a walking rhubarb. He was renowned. I think he's still has the all-time record for fines in the American Association / Old Northern League. He is the guy who managed to get kicked out of a game against the St. Paul Saints, along with then the manager of the Saints, Marty Scott. They had a huge scrap. And they both went after the umpire. They both get kicked out. 2 innings later, the Saints had their sumo wrestling between inning match. Guess who came out of the sumo uniforms and then razzed the umpire? They fought, And the umpire realized, gosh, this is Simi and Marty. Tossed them both out again. Another fine. Doug Simonek had he had the art of the rhubarb down, and it's a shame more people didn't see that over his career.
Hang on. These are the two opposing managers who got into the sumo suits.
Yeah.
So they could come back on the
field and talk back to the umpire.
That's funny.
Oh, that's incredible.
Classic.
That was just Simi. And he actually was the nicest guy. And he passed away a few years ago, and his daughter wrote the nicest note about him. And, he was sort of one of those gruff guys. But boy, when Winnipeg would face off with Fargo, there would be taunting nonstop. And in fact, I was at a Winnipeg game once when Simi was the Fargo coach, and he didn't go after the mascot, but boy, the mascot got on top of the dugout and razzed him during the game. And it was very deep feelings between the two teams at that point.
The 1997 legend of the Midwest League is Ozzie the Cougar against Big Lug the Lugnut in the Midwest League Championship Series. That was a rhubarb that nobody could forget.
That's great.
On that note,
go at it more often.
On that note, let's wrap things up for today, because we covered the gamut of different topics. Big thanks, Mick Gillispie. Big thanks, Kevin Reichard.
Thank you, Jesse. This was so enjoyable. And as I said, next week we'll set up our Zoom video chat so that people can watch live and contribute questions and comments.
I just wanted to show off my coronavirus house beard. This is, for me, years in the making. Like every day I wake up, I'm like, I can't wait to shave it, but I kind of like the fact that I can grow one out. So very proud of that, guys.
Yeah. Like that's the good looking beard for, let's say, the starting pitcher or the reliever who you remember when he came up and he was throwing 98 and now he's throwing 94, but the slider is wicked.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I every time I look at myself, I'm like, being a history minor in college, I'm like, I kind of look like one of those guys from the Civil War, like they didn't get a chance to shave, like kind of a ratty looking beard. But it's great to talk to you both again. And, like I said, man, thinking about your brother, Jesse, I hope that he gets through this, as I know it's a really tough deal.
This has been the Ballpark Digest chat. May you face the day like a manager in a sumo suit. I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler for Kevin and Mick. Thank you very much for watching and listening.